Swasi is away on holiday.
Okay,
So we're good to go.
great. Okay, well, welcome everyone. I guess we'll get started. So we initially had a fairly short agenda, and then when we started looking at some of the new items that are coming up, particularly in the Rural Islands Economic Forum group that's been working, there actually is quite a bit that I think would be worthwhile talking about as a group and getting some input from our larger committee. So we've got, again, I think a fairly full agenda for today. And we will try to end on or before time. That is the goal. Approval of the agenda.
I had a late item, I sent by email and I forgot to print, but I can do that while we're talking, which is the results of the survey. Can we add that later on in the agenda, maybe? Maybe 6 point, no. Can we just call it 7.2?
Okay.
And this is the follow-up survey for the summit?
Yeah. Hi, Kirsten.
Hey, Kirsten.
Okay.
We're just getting going.
Okay.
You can move to approve the agenda if you like.
As amended?
Yeah. As amended. Any other additions? So, Steph, you brought on here the letter and
We added almost,
your
yeah.
application. Okay. Great. Okay. So, someone to move to approve the agenda. Vaughn, and second, Wolfgang. All in favor? Agenda approved. And then minutes of our last meeting from June 14th. And
the only thing is, Steph and I talked about the work plan
yes,
for the Rural Dividend Fund application. I don't know if you can correct us here, because when I looked through it, I don't know if the development of the work plan is the first 3 months. I don't think it is, right?
What are you referring to in the
So
agenda?
so in here, in the minutes, we've
Right.
got down...
Which page?
Sorry, it's page 5. That the Rural Dividend Fund application has included work plan developments as the first 3 months of the CEDO project. And so...
We can just take that out.
Yeah, Steph
It's
and I
not-
talked about
none of
it
this is-
yesterday, and when I've been looking through it, I don't think that's quite how it is. I know I have to do it, and it's phased, but I don't think it's not the first 3 months that I'm developing the work plan, it's just that that's part of the first...
Of the first 6 months? Yeah.
Yeah.
I will take that out.
okay, so
Yeah.
clarification on that. Yeah.
Actually, maybe leave it in, but just delete as the first 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Had
Yeah.
included work plan development.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
I
'cause
guess
I have
the
to
point of
do
the
it.
point of it was to say that you didn't have one on the table
Yes.
and there's lots of
Yeah.
latitude.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because
Intent
both of
there.
us went, oh, Bruce is going to be confused yesterday when we chatted about it. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So take out the first 3 months, okay?
Any other changes or additions, deletions? Let me see. Remember we had the presentation from Emma for wayfinding, and that was the bulk of it.
Motion to approve?
Okay, thank you, Maureen. Second? Ed, and all in favor?
Natasha?
Natasha, are you on with us? Okay, sounds quite quiet. Just let's try. Talk again for a second. Okay, thanks. Just want to make sure if you do want to jump in that we can hear you.
You're very quiet and I've got you on full volume. It's just like when you talk sometimes.
Might be an idea, send, if we don't respond and you're trying to get in, to send an email to staff, I guess.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
There you go.
We hear you. Okay, so, our, and do we have Wendy on?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. So public comments, do we have any comments from the public? Robin, you're just visiting and listening, okay, great. And let's review our action items from page 10. Actually, on page 10. What is it?
Yes, it is, page 10.
What are we doing?
Yes, here we go.
Okay, so we're gonna skip Wendy's for now. Business engagement working group. Find a champion who can start a co-working group. This is in reference to supporting home businesses. I think it was Robin who mentioned that we had done that engagement event, and maybe as a full committee, the work is done there, but the subcommittee could work with that community to try to get
So
somebody
why don't we, I think, unless someone else knows something about it, why don't we just leave that as an
Okay.
action item for next meeting?
ongoing. Business engagement working group, meet with the chief librarian to collaborate on co-working space ideas.
So we tried to do that.
Okay,
There was just, I don't know, the emails kind of died off because nobody could find a time that was working for everybody.
okay.
So nothing really happened.
So just
Yeah,
ongoing there?
Yeah.
Sounded like there was an interest to meet and talk about it.
Yeah, so Robin had tried to, she was reaching out and then dates weren't working and things, so then, I don't know, I think she's let it go for now.
For now.
Okay, so let's roll that one.
I'd like to comment
Yeah,
on
go
that.
ahead.
There's a survey out now by the library looking at the use of, part of it is usage of space.
Okay.
So we should have all received it, I think.
Yeah.
Yes. Has anyone not received it?
You know, I haven't done it,
Okay.
so that's maybe something we can put on our own action items to complete the library survey.
It went out on Facebook as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And share that on our own Facebooks, etc. Yes, we do.
Okay. Post and promote the library consultation event on June 18th. That is relevant, so it's done. Kirsten, yes, provide counselors with contact names and help them prepare for conversations regarding connectivity service provision at the UBCM conference.
Just in time.
Yeah,
Sure.
I know, this is when they all flood in right now.
Those action item lists are helpful.
It really is.
Instead of whoops.
You're satisfied with that then, Maureen?
Uh,
Maybe more from her? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wendy, she also responded, she has done this meeting, has been completed.
Yeah.
Councillor Nicholson, the interim report.
Yeah, Kathy and I talked about that, and Helen is working on it in conjunction with Matthew at
Yes.
the Rural Dividend Program, so it's underway.
Perfect. And I've got just gonna keep those toilets on the radar in December. I've got that there as a reminder.
And council did support the toilet recommendation. So there will be toilet signs going forward.
Excellent.
They will be put up in November. I'm sorry, folks.
And washed off again for next year.
Speaking of signs, I noticed that the public end of public road sign is still here.
Did you notice that this morning? This
How
morning
is
you
that
saw that?
possible?
Well,
I just finished telling
okay.
someone how proud I was that the committee managed to remove a sign.
I will call. Now, it's come from, it's gone, it went to council and then didn't go to council. We we made a recommendation to council, and then on the council agenda, it said, recommendation dealt with by staff.
Right.
So I flagged that and just said, we gotta see if that sign's there, we keep forgetting to look.
Forgetting to check.
So I will action.
Shall I just take it down and deliver it? to
I will
them?
take
It'd be faster.
Yeah.
I will follow up.
Old cut says, yeah.
Before you go too far with that, the purpose of a sign is primarily a disclaimer.
Yes.
And this is a strictly legal issue, and the municipality could be in a position of being quite vulnerable if they would not state that. So before they do that, it should not be just a recommendation to be followed. There may be repercussions.
So talk to Kathy.
Why would there be legal?
Well, if there is an accident there, it's not a public road it's not owned by the public, but it's used by the public. So if there is ever an accident, then the question is, who is liable or who has caused the accident or the damage? Is it
Is
the
there a sign every other
municipality?
space in the island that the municipality doesn't own?
Most
Oh,
of them,
yeah,
yes.
a lot of-
Yes.
Yeah, we've got one where we
Yeah.
have one since we're a private road.
But the recommendation went to council from us, and then it was decided we handled the staff level, so regardless, we need to follow
Well,
up and find out what the
If they need to
reasoning
keep the
is.
sign, that's fine,
We just need
for
to-
legal reasons. But the whole point is that it's off-putting to,
Mhm.
you know, our role is, we were addressing the whole tourism coming up to the square, right? So then can we do something that encourages people to understand that they should enter there? There's a little sign underneath it that says, welcome to Artisan Square,
Yeah.
but I don't know. I guess that's the whole point, is that
Yeah.
how can we just make it more welcoming? Because that seems to be,
What they asked for.
yeah.
I'll follow up.
Great.
Okay, and maybe we should follow up to find out if it's still an issue for them.
No.
Who's it?
No, I'm not opening it up. Let's just move on, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if they have a sign underneath that says welcome to Artisan Square, that to me sounds like the answer.
Well, follow up, if they're happy to take it down, take it down.
Yeah.
If not, then you know what, Steph, we probably just
Not proceed
forget it.
because.
I don't know who they is, right?
Well,
now.
Christoph would be the person to talk to,
Yeah.
because he's the property manager for the
Yeah,
Stratton,
but it was more just the feedback from, in general, from all the businesses going, you know, do everything we can to try and get people up there and make it more welcoming, right? Because it's just, aside from having a shuttle, it's hard.
Yeah.
People don't know they're there.
I'll follow up.
Okay,
Well, it should probably read private road or not public road, public traffic encouraged or allowed. But it's owned by the Strata Corporation of the Artisans Square, and they have to maintain it. So if there are potholes or so on, it's not the municipality. So on the
No, yeah, I get that.
So it's not a public road, so it's factually
can
correct.
I, informally, I could just call Christoph and ask him what he
I
thinks
think
about
leave it with staff,
Yeah.
legal
because
stuff.
what council has been told is that this particular recommendation was dealt with by staff.
Yeah.
So staff should finish
Okay,
whatever it is.
all right, let's leave that then to staff. And speaking of staff, next on the agenda is staff updates. And Helen, do you want to take a few minutes and?
Can I just jump in? Sorry, I did change the order of the agenda because Maureen Sawaski has to leave early and she seems to be quite stressed when that happens, so.
Right.
Flipped it, see if it works.
Okay.
Let us know. Sorry, Alan, go ahead.
All right. So, I will be as brief as possible, so we're not sitting here for ages. First of all, let's get out our horns and toot them. Because we've got exciting news. We finally, thanks to our awesome person over there, got our exemption forevermore for
Fantastic.
Dividend.
Yes. Yeah.
So thank you, Maureen, you're amazing for all your hard work.
Hold on.
It's not just Maureen.
Yeah, not just Maureen.
Not just Maureen, but
This-
you did have a big part to play.
Well, this came about with the support of the board of Metro Vancouver, which is really pretty significant. I mean, they took this decision, the decision to support Bowen Island at a full board meeting. The Islands Trust also advocated on our behalf because we are the only island in the Islands Trust that couldn't apply. There was support from our MLA and from our member of Parliament. Our Islands Trust trustee, Sue Ellen Fast, pushed probably equally hard on the Islands Trust side. So this really was a significant team effort to get this through. And it's kind of surprising that it actually went through. I spoke with the CEO of Islands Trust on Wednesday. I told her, I thanked her for her support, and she said she was astonished that we had gotten it. She was also astonished previously when we had gotten the exemption. And the other small municipalities in Metro Vancouver who have been eager to get access to this kind of status and the funding have recently been told they're not going to be eligible because they are not a unique island municipality and they are not part of the Islands Trust. They are Metro Vancouver.
With just reading the letter, I had the impression that because of the ferry, that really was the deciding factor. It's that we don't have that free and open access to Metro Vancouver. So,
Wonderful news.
we may sometimes
Wonderful
be
news.
frustrated with the ferry, but perhaps in this case,
Mhm.
it seems to be that essential portion of our makeup that has allowed us to.
Well, we've got definite identity, and I think that makes a big difference, because if you look at all the others, it is a bit trickier to define them, so I think it does make a huge difference. It's definitely unique and identifiable, so.
Do we have plans to apply to the next intake then?
We're gonna be, it's coming up, just wait, just wait.
Just one other thing I think is of real interest is so with Metro Vancouver, what were, at the board level, what was the sort of the discussion like? I guess I'm trying to understand what it was, like did they feel like they might be giving something up by recommending for Bowen or solidifying something that they value the rural character of Bowen Island and and its relationship to Metro?
The latter part, the rural
Yeah.
character, definitely. In the regional growth strategy, Metro 2040, we're identified as rural within the larger regional district. There was a lot of documentation that went forward in support of the request. And they had their planning staff and the planning committee review all of that documentation that had rationale and so on. And the Metro staff concluded that the way that the eligibility criteria for different communities was being established was too crude. They said it doesn't have sufficient granularity to recognize the differences among communities. So to say that all communities within Metro Vancouver are the same, essentially, for the purposes of the Rural Dividend Fund, just doesn't take into consideration the uniqueness of our position. So it was, in some respects, a very easy decision for the board to make because their staff, their planning committee all recommended support. And then it was a matter simply of directing the chair to write a letter in support, which he did.
Terrific. Yeah.
There was a little bit of, well, can we get Lions Bay and Anmore and Belcara into the picture? And that kind of came up after the fact, but we sort of resisted it because they needed to make a separate argument on behalf of their communities, where our argument transfer very easily.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Again, great, okay, thanks.
So that brings us on to the next bit. So, based on that, and we've been hoping that we would get that, obviously. So based on that, we took a look at all of the projects that have been successful to date, and our CCI took a look at that. And Steph attached them all. There's quite a big list, so obviously I'm not going to go through that because there's a lot. So this is the web page that's got all of those projects. So if you want to,
Which one should I do, the fourth intake, do you think?
sure, do fourth. I mean, they're all kind of interlinked. So what I did, yeah, do fourth, absolutely, yeah.
Those are the little projects.
So these are all the projects that they've been successfully funded by the rural dividend. And so what I did was I looked across all of the different intakes to see if there were themes that came out in terms of what they've been funding. Because for us, if we were going to be applying, we wanted to look and see if there were specific things that people have been applying for that were successful. And obviously we know that certain groups and municipalities have been successful over and over again. And we're like, okay, have these guys got some kind of magic formula, you know, for applying? So we wanted to look at that, and then obviously look in line with our island plan and the OCP to see how the two matched up, so that we could look how we would strategically apply for the funding, because we don't want to be, you know, sort of caught off guard in terms of applying. You don't want to be applying for the sake of applying. Nobody wants that in a grant application. So we want to be moving forward, going, okay, you know, this year we apply for this year we apply for this, so there's some kind of strategic thinking behind our applications. So we did all of that.
I've got a question.
Absolutely.
I noticed the first was the Arts Council.
Yeah.
Would our Arts Council apply directly, or would we just
So-
apply through
So
Community?
what we could do is the best way to get the maximum amount of money is
Yes.
you do it as a partnership. And so that's on my list
Okay.
because I found a few that were arts related. There aren't very many,
Yes.
but there are a few. It
Okay.
is in my list. It's
We'll talk
But there are a
offline,
few.
yes.
and they
A
looked
few what,
quite
sorry?
promising. Arts related
Oh, I see.
funded
Okay.
projects. They looked quite promising.
Okay.
So that's definitely one of the ones I highlighted. I did a thing, yeah, you'll see it. I haven't put it in the agenda here. It's basically the funded projects where there were themes, and then there were other ones of note that might be good for us to look at. And the arts ones came under the ones of note just because there weren't very many.
Okay.
So I think Maureen will confirm this in terms of the maximum amount you can get
Mhm.
is 500,000, and that's if you do a partnership application.
Mhm.
So that's really, if we want to go for that, that's the best way to do that. So with the arts guys, that's the best way for us to do it, I
Okay.
think.
Thank you.
And it also means you've got more people to
Yes.
help out,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then deliver the thing. So I think that's probably the best way forward with that. But that's not to say if you guys wanted to apply for something that you couldn't.
Okay.
You absolutely could. You just wouldn't be eligible for quite as much. I think it's only up to 100,000, isn't it? Yeah, as a single applicant. So it's a significant difference in the amount of money. So that's just what you need to take into account if you are thinking about applying.
So we don't have to coordinate as a community?
No, not
So in
necessarily.
other words, the
but
municipality
it's-
can be
Absolutely,
applying,
and
the
then
arts
the Arts
council can
Council
be
could,
applying.
and then, you know, whoever other groups, because it tends, you know, it needs to be a group of people. But I would say if they're groups that we know about, we probably need to just think about that, so we've not got millions of these things going in, because obviously we need to think about that as an island, right? We don't want 100 applications going in. So yeah, if we've got an idea, then that would be great. So
What I'm just
that-
saying is, does it help to be more strategic, or maybe not?
Well, that's it. I think it probably does.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think it would,
yeah,
right?
That
I
it
think
helps,
so.
but on the other hand, we can only be strategic to a certain point.
That we
Because the eligibility to apply is for the community, not
Absolutely.
just for the
Yeah,
municipality.
so if there's community groups and they want to do a project and it meets the criteria, I mean, that's the thing, it has to be strongly connected
So how are we
to
letting the
economic
community know?
development.
They haven't got much
Well,
time. have they?
first of all,
Not for
let's
this one.
talk about the timeline, because
No.
doesn't it close July 15th?
August 15th.
Oh, August
Yeah.
15th, okay.
But it's still not an awful lot of time to
No.
put together, you know, a successful grant application.
Maybe,
Um,
maybe to sort of show transparency and be a source of information is adding a link just to the municipality's website.
Yeah.
So that way you could even advertise who has put in applications.
We absolutely
Yeah.
could. We could put this up too, I guess, and say, you know, this is what people have done to date, you know, what's
Yes, exactly.
successful.
So we just received the letter a
Yeah.
couple of days
We
ago.
did.
This is the first agenda
We did.
that this has appeared on. I mean, we've been
Yes.
aware
Yeah.
that this was granted. It hasn't even come to council yet.
No.
So in terms of letting the community know, it has to go through council, and we can do a press release and so on, and just informally
Yeah.
spread.
So is that gonna
spread the
be in
word.
time for this intake, or are we just sort
It'll
of
be,
letting this?
it'll be in time.
Yeah.
Next council meeting is the 22nd,
22nd,
something like that. And then there's another one on the 29th.
Nine.
But, I mean, the important thing is that this is an ongoing eligibility. So if people, and frankly, when people look at the application form, they'll probably realize just how much work needs to go into it. So there may not be a lot of folks who are ready to apply, but they could get ready
They
to
absolutely
apply
could for the next one, because I think to just jump in and apply for this one might be a bit of an undertaking. But yeah, I think you could certainly, if you had a group, or you could even make a group actually in time for the next one. You know, if you really wanted to do that and you had a project in mind, that could also be something that people wanted to do. And they could even come to us and have a chat to us about that too. You know, if that's something that people wanted to do. So I think that's a possibility too. I think the time frame for this one, it would be a bit of an ask.
So what it seems like is we could think a little bit right now is what would the connection, like what resources might the municipality be able to provide for groups that were interested? And then also, you know, when we have Wendy Coe available, I don't know if she has resources, like perhaps we should be considering scheduling a public information session.
Yeah,
about
that's a
the
good
work
idea.
that they-
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think certainly as the, I mean, they're very clear that any application has to have a very strong link to economic development. And they've said that again and again and again, every webinar that they do, it has to be very strong. So I think in terms of who would be the connecting people, it would be you guys. Because you're on the Economic Development Committee.
So if that is the case, then we should probably, again, take some thought about, you know, creating a communication place. Seems like it should be within the municipality, and maybe we can ask you to do it, Helen, or maybe there's a more appropriate place for people who are interested to express their interest to the committee. I don't know, what do you think, Tony?
I don't think that would work.
No?
I think given the timelines that
Yeah.
we're looking at, to try to ramp up the municipality to provide resources and so forth, I don't think we have the resources.
Right.
Our communications coordinator is on holidays for the next 2 weeks. This doesn't come to council, as I said, until the 22nd of the month. There has been some preliminary discussion, Helen and I and Kathy, and we have talked about what some potential partnerships might be that are far enough along that could be supported through an application. When we go to council on the 22nd, we will be making some recommendations as to where to put the efforts in the remaining 3 weeks in getting an application pulled together.
Right.
For this intake.
For this
Right.
intake.
For this intake.
I think strategically it makes way more sense to inform the community, very simply, but not to put in place a whole municipal machine to encourage people to apply.
I guess what I'm thinking is if people say, wow, could we apply, and then their next step is what?
They would get in contact with the Rural Dividend Program. There are 2 staff who are hosting regular webinars that people can participate in. They
Right.
don't have to be members of an organization or municipal government, and they can get themselves informed as to how to go forward. And I think that is probably a better way to go, rather than connecting this too closely to municipal support for community groups, because the municipality will be applying in this round. I'm pretty certain that will happen. Also, if you review these pretty closely, you'll see that there aren't buckets of money going up to
No.
the one community in each intake.
No.
So to encourage 10 groups in the community to make an application is only going to lead to disappointment. The likelihood of them all getting funded is not there. It's not like a community
No.
grants program that we
There's,
operate
it's
at
maybe
municipal level.
one or two
There.
for each community. It's,
Would make
it's
sense.
not more than
Yeah.
that. Because obviously they've only got a finite amount of resources that they have to share between all, and they've said we're oversubscribed. For every intake, they're oversubscribed. So they really do have to be strong applications, strong links to economic development. And there's lots of people that want the money, understandably so. There's lots of people that need it. So, yeah, I think.
Sorry,
Marsh
did you
is
say,
probably
did you
right.
say a partnership application could be up to 500,000?
Up to 500,000.
A
Doesn't mean
partnership
they'll
being-
definitely get 500,000, but it's
Okay,
up
but
to
a
that.
partnership being a partnership between an organization and the municipality?
No,
Not
anybody.
necessarily.
It could be two organisations.
Just
So
any
this
kind of
could be
partnership,
BIAC and, I don't know, like the Community Foundation, for
Okay.
instance. Yeah.
And is there a limit per community then?
No,
No.
there isn't.
No, okay.
No, they look at the applications on
They
the
do.
merits, but I'm sure that informally they have a sense of,
I'm
we
sure
can't.
There's a lot of under 10 grand sort of.
there is, yeah.
This is the category, this is
Yeah.
the 10
Where
grand
is the limit?
category.
Oh,
Yeah.
I
see.
There's,
Yeah,
there
there's the
are
higher
two
one.
more categories.
Okay, so we don't need to necessarily fully understand the process in the committee right now.
See how it says single applicant and partnerships? They're the bigger ones. So single applicant is up to 100,000, and then partnerships is up to 500,000. Yeah.
Can we know what the municipality is planning on applying for?
Well, just hang on for a second. So I want to revisit this communication structure that we're talking about,
Yeah.
because even within the committee, we could spend the next hour asking Maureen and Helen questions about the program for our own, getting our own ideas going, and other people in the community would have the same ideas. But that's what we're saying is that's not likely or productive at this point. But at the same time, people are still going to want to ask these questions.
Yeah.
And so what we need to be clear about is how we're directing that, or, as a committee, if it comes to the committee, or if it comes in the municipality in some, addressed to Helen or a CAO or whomever. Yeah.
So surely it's our responsibility to inform the community, and we're not suggesting they partner. The fact that they may be refused and disappointed, that's full disclosure as well, but isn't it our duty to let people know that they can go for this and what the plan is?
Well, let me just frame it as this. We are undertaking as a committee and as a community, a whole community economic development exercise with the plan, and just in our functioning of our committee, and the commitment from council for doing that. So, really, if there are entrepreneurial people or other not-for-profit groups, or people who would be interested in economic development in the committee or in the community, by definition, we should be in contact with them.
Well, the simplest way to do it is to get in touch with Bronwyn. She's been waiting to find out about, is it confirmed or not.
Right.
So letting Bronwyn know, sending her a copy of the letter, making sure it gets into the next undercurrent.
Yeah,
And
at
there's
the very
plenty of
least,
time.
yeah.
Yes.
So how do we, again, it goes to this idea that we don't want to, we don't have the resources, the communications person isn't available at the moment, and Maureen, you don't have the time to go through individually with 10 different organizations and educate them about what it is. So we need to be clear about that.
Well, can you bring up the website for rural dividend? I mean, there's a ton of information on here.
Right.
They post on the right-hand side when the next webinar is coming up. So, the program news summarizes that kind of thing. The how to apply, if you go in there, it's very detailed. And the staff are helpful. And it would be far better for people to get the information from the source rather than, mediated through the municipality.
Steph, is it possible just to email that link?
It's in your agenda.
Oh, it is?
I put little tests in there to see if anybody's reading it. It's called, sorry,
Which
Fawn, I'm
version?
just kidding.
Which
It's,
agenda?
5, what?
Which one? There are several different versions.
The newest,
The newest.
yes.
Because I think
You know,
I clicked on it.
5.1B,
this
project
ongoing
linked list.
Like, if we want to make sure the business community is aware of this opportunity, I think certainly once it's considered by council, then it's public,
Yes.
and then it's going to be in the council minutes. It's certainly in our minutes here for this meeting as well, and I agree, just sort of linking directly to the source. If there's an article in the Undercurrent, which also would have a link to the source for funding, I think it's true, like just to empower organizations to access it directly and just to make sure that we do a robust communication outreach through the Undercurrent and council and of course our minutes, that would make sense. The only thing that sort of flags for me that if I was a business owner, what would be of interest to me is just to have transparency as to who else is applying or what other initiatives are out there, to see if I can then, because as we know with funding, if you can dovetail another initiative, it increases your chances of getting it. And so if you're, for example, maybe you're an artist and maybe you do classes and maybe you do other things, but the Arts Council is doing other things, that may be an opportunity, for example, to dovetail a funding application. So I almost think just being reflective on what can we do as a committee to make sure that there's transparency amongst just our business community in terms of who's doing what and what opportunities are there, so that if you did want to reach out and partner with another business or partner with an organization.
Well, that's why I was wondering if we were gonna, is it possible to know what the municipality is applying for, so it's.
We don't know at this point. We need to get council approval. There are a couple of tentatives.
Oh,
Can I just float us?
Can I just flag
Yeah,
something?
yeah.
Businesses. So the eligible applicants for this are municipal governments, nonprofits, strong emphasis on First Nations. An individual business, probably not. There's for-profit entities can serve as a partner with an eligible applicant.
So you see that for example, is an example of how something could dovetail.
Yeah.
So, and I think that's an interesting conversation for the business community here. Like it was interesting to look at some of the letters of support, and you can see that the business community really wants, needless to say, wants to support that homegrown economic foundation.
Right.
And so one can't help but to think then, how can we just create a venue for better communication between
Natasha, I'm just
nonprofits
cleaning up
and
the feedback, okay?
for-profits and the municipality
Okay, so
to
I'm
just
gonna,
allow
get Wendy
more
and
momentum
Paul as
to
well.
happen in that space. And maybe it's just as easy as, on the municipal website that, for those applications that are going in, that you can voluntarily post it. Or if you're looking to partner, there could be, a resource page that way, or relevant links, to of course, to the province's page. And anyway, so it could just be as easy as maybe one web page on the municipal website that is a source of information with additional links, but also an opportunity to give some transparency as to who's applying for what.
Yeah, what I'm wondering is, and float it out there to see if there's an interest, is that we have our working groups, business engagement and so on.
Hi, Wendy. I'm just going to patch through Natasha, and then you're on, okay? One moment, please.
So given that this will be an intake that presumably will happen next year as well, and 6 months to a year might be an appropriate timeline to get an application ready to put in.
Hi Natasha, I'm just patching you through.
If we had in this group
Wendy?
a working group for rural dividend applications,
They're in the
that
middle of
could
a
be a
conversation.
place
It's
where
on the table.
people would go or would be invited to come, and we could suggest partnerships perhaps. That would be right down the middle of the role of our economic development
I
community.
agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So-
going forward, yeah.
And so that, if we were to form that working group, at the next meeting, let's say, and people could think about, whether that's of interest to them. There probably wouldn't necessarily be a lot for them to do right away, although they might get a question from a group or two for this intake. But really, it would be a whole process over the next year to learn about the program and what could fit.
Next meeting September, so this
Yeah.
intake would be relevant.
Yeah.
Would it really be a working group, or could it just be a point person on our committee who
Yeah.
then is that expert
Yeah,
in,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's good.
And I mean, if it was appropriate, that person could work with council and staff
Exactly.
to understand what was going on
It
with
could also
that.
be part of Helen's role.
Yeah.
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 I don't know when I would do it for sure.
Well, what I'm wondering is it obviously it would be in communication with Helen because, everything that this committee is doing needs to
Well,
be
that's it.
in
I mean, I think
communication
that
with
would
Helen.
be good because I think we do need to do things. Sorry, put my teeth back in. We do need to do things strategically, just so that we don't end up being like, oh, hang on a minute, that's part of the plan. Just a minute, don't run away, come back. So that would be good to do that. So I think that's a good idea.
So if we had a community member or a committee member, it doesn't necessarily have to be a CBC member. It could be a member of the community who is interested in.
Well, it'd be good if it
Putting that
was, I
on.
think, just
Yeah.
so that we've got that link, right?
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So let's, especially for the benefit of the people that aren't here today, maybe we should just
Next meeting.
make an action item to
That they're in charge.
to find a committee member.
I thought
What's
that's
that?
where you were going, that they're in charge of
You were
this.
gonna
Yeah.
volunteer somebody, yeah.
Yeah.
Volunteer.
So I'm actually interested in that,
Okay.
but let's put it for the next.
Yeah.
Well, after it goes to council, it would make
Yes.
sense
Yeah.
that it could be an action item.
So Helen, I guess maybe this could be your action item to solicit the EDC committee for someone to help you with
I
fielding
can do
rural
that.
dividend?
Point
That's-
person.
Okay,
That's
that's
more
that
my-
action item.
Yeah.
And then it'll be after the committee, after the council meeting.
Okay, but you can, I'm interested, so.
Good for you.
Great.
Good for you. We don't
We
have to
have to
solicit
agree on this
anyone.
idea.
Okay, yeah, I mean, we're not making a resolution, we're just creating an action item, right? Right. But does anyone not want to have that action item?
Okay. Okay, so that's members of the public. Could contact
Well,
someone. I would appoint someone, or I'll work with someone.
yeah.
And so just to be clear, because Maureen knows this, if I don't write things down, because of stuff, I forget them immediately. So the purpose of this, I'm going to call it working group for now, it's to look at the rural dividend information, etc., with the potential of A, possibly applying, B, partnering up with people to help members of the community perhaps put in strategic applications.
I think the idea is it's about communication, right? So it's
Yeah.
communicating what about the program, so for instance, the press release or information to Bronwyn that comes through communication municipality, this
Yeah.
working group could help with that.
Yeah.
If someone contacts the committee wanting to talk about an application,
Yeah.
we would direct them to
To
that
the
person,
group,
or
okay,
to that group. So it'd be about communication, I think.
okay. And we are thinking.
And advocacy too, I guess,
Yeah.
if there were ways that we could help people with their
Okay.
applications, we would
Okay.
try to do that.
And we're thinking that we would put out Now, is it us that's going to put out a communication, or are we thinking, because the municipality would put out a communication following the announcement to council, so it would most likely be a muni communication about the rural dividends.
Yeah.
And you're happy with that? You
Yeah,
don't
oh,
want
yeah.
to put a separate thing out?
No, I don't
No.
think so.
Okay.
So it goes council, Bronwyn,
Bronwyn, I think we can go to Bronwyn just with the letter.
okay.
And
So
get the
it's-
word out,
okay.
and then
then-
officially at council.
And that will be you and Helen?
Well, and Kathy probably too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we'll just put a link as well. Do you want the link when we do the letter?
That makes sense, yeah.
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, the message is clear, yeah, that you'd like the word to get out to the community as soon as possible. Maybe people will pick it up and they're free to do so,
Mhm.
you know, as an idea. With the identifying a person or a working group here, I wonder if it maybe makes sense just to have that person or working group come up with their own terms of reference, like have them reflect a little bit on what they
Yeah.
might reasonably do, rather than us coming to
Mm-hmm.
a landing. 'Cause
Yeah.
that's the way all of our other
Yeah.
working groups have evolved. It's been small group discussion, figuring things out, coming back and getting the okay.
Yeah.
Sorry if I just jump in for a quick second.
Hi, is that Wendy?
Hi, it's Natasha.
Hi, Natasha. You got to get closer to us, your mic, honey.
Okay, I'm talking really close to it.
Okay.
We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's not working. Can we visit your comments when you get here?
Or email. request.
Oh yeah, send me an email and I can shout it out.
Or text.
Okay, we'll have to get that after. Okay, so moving on then, Helen, do you want to talk just a little bit about, you were mentioning the work plan at the beginning of the meeting in the
Oh,
agenda.
yes, okay.
right?
So obviously the grant application that was done had a work plan attached to it. So it is in your agenda package from page 20. Your agenda package. So I've taken over that. We will be developing a work plan in phases, because to develop an entire work plan for 2 years would be incredibly exciting. And so Kathy and I had a meeting yesterday. We had a weekly meeting and we talked about phase 1 of the work plan, because we have to go to council, you know, with the different phases and sort of say, hey, this is the general gist of what we're doing. And we've agreed that probably the way that we'll do that is I'll do interim reports just in terms of, you know, this is what we've done so far, this is what we're thinking of doing next, rather than me going to them with a chart with dates on it, because nobody wants to see that at council level. So that's what we talked about yesterday. So I've been developing my phase 1 work plan based on what you can see in phase 1 there. And I've just been fleshing that out in terms of the tasks basically that I need to do over the first 6 months. It's actually 3 months because we started late. So it's up until the end of September, that phase. So I've got it here. I didn't include it because it's not finished. So we'll just briefly speak to it. The main thing really is that I'm going to be starting my research quite soon. That's next week. That'll be starting. So that includes me starting to look at the work that's been done to date on economic development, so that's sort of our bylaws and policies and things like that. And also I'll be looking into our comparator communities just to see what's happening there. So that's the main 2 key pieces of work now, basically.
Right.
And then obviously when I've done that, I'll be summarising all my findings and just dissecting all of the information and producing a report so that it's actually understandable and readable for us all. And I think probably I will do a report to council of that, although it doesn't say I need to be here. I think I probably should, because I think they'll be interested to see that, just so that they can see, you know, how things are going. So that's basically a very brief overview.
Okay, good. So basically, we're into research, we're into
research.
findings,
Yeah.
and then we'll be hearing back from you, and council will be hearing back from you on that
Yeah,
by
just so
September.
that, so
Yeah.
it'll be the very end of September, probably beginning of October, when I've got the information together in a report, digestible form.
Okay, good. Just one suggestion that comes up for me is, having looked at the comparator communities for other initiatives
Yes.
before, that, for instance, the business licensing is the
Yes.
one that I was familiar with. Although the comparator communities are very interesting in different ways, size, you know, sort of location, they're not generally islands.
No.
And with the Rural Island Economic Forum gearing up for November, there's a whole new information flow happening
Okay.
between the Southern Gulf Islands,
Yeah.
you know, Quadra Cortez, and up in Malcolm Island. And through that organization,
Yeah.
you know, you might be able to tag on, and for instance, something more you're probably aware of, but the Southern Gulf Island Community Resource Center, for instance,
Okay.
is something that I wasn't aware of before.
Right.
But seems to be a fairly organized entity, and they have some
Alright.
interesting initiatives and rural dividend applications and some things going
Okay.
on, and being implemented right now.
Okay.
So if we could, in your research, make sure that we're really looking at our island
Yeah. Okay.
comparators.
Yeah.
And contextualizing that in a different way maybe than we have before, not just population level,
Yeah.
but, you know, putting weight to the similar communities'
Yes.
values
Okay.
and
Yeah, I think that's a
economic
great
challenges.
suggestion. Yeah, it's a great
Yeah.
suggestion, because it does make a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I've added that in. I'm in contact with them, because obviously we have the contacts now, so, yeah, good suggestion.
Great, okay, so we've spent quite a bit of time already, and this has been good to get up to speed. There's a lot to think about here. Tourism, Bowen Island, Ed, do you want to, or no, you're not
No.
tourism. Is there anyone from
I'm
tourism?
just gonna try to
No.
get someone, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Does anyone have any comments that they're aware of with regards to tourism right now?
I've seen them doing loads of stuff.
Yeah.
They're very active, other than that.
Yeah, okay. Let's defer that then.
Okay.
And council, do Wolfgang or Maureen, do you want to say something?
Both gangs, two councils again.
Oh, yeah, that's right, you're not. The past councilor want to say something?
I was thinking I missed something.
I was thinking, you know what was funny is I was thinking, oh, we're missing one councillor today, but no, we're missing two councillors. Right.
She just got elected.
Yeah, you just got elected, yeah. But if you want to say something, Wolfgang, then.
The thought of being a council would scare me right now. They have huge challenges ahead of them.
Mhm.
Just looking at.
We just got an email from Natasha. Do you want me to read it to you? What her question was?
Can we do that, Maureen?
What's that?
Oh, sure,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, go ahead.
You want to wait until after? Or
No, go ahead.
Okay. Natasha says, I'm hearing about 75%, so apologies if this suggestion is way off. This comment is for the working group for the Dividend Fund. I've attended a few roundtable working groups where there's a two-part discussion. In round one, everyone talks about who they are and what they're trying to do. Round two, we go around in the same order. Everyone weighs in and offers advice. This may be a good way to advise and inform. Just a thought, Natasha. Thank you, Natasha.
Okay, great. Yeah, we don't hear it at all, so. Thank you, Kim.
Yep.
Okay, anything you think we need to hear about from council right now?
Yeah, there's The Islands Trust is undertaking a review of the policy statement, and that sounds horribly boring and dry, but it's actually quite important. It's the first time that this has been done in at least 20 years, and they're doing it in a series of phases. The first phase is going to deal with first two parts of the policy statement, which have to do with sort of really, high-level principles and so on. And then the latter phases will deal with things like sustainability and so on. So there will be public consultation beginning in the fall. What's important about this is that any planning that takes place on Bowen Island that goes through the municipality has a subsequent review at the Islands Trust to ensure that whatever we're intending to do on the island is consistent with the what's called the object of the Islands Trust, which boils down to preserve and protect. And it will be important for us to keep an eye on the kinds of changes that might be made. So, for example, there was discussion at council of one of the reasons for doing the review was to look at changes in policy that might be required because of climate change. And that can have an impact on things like recommended setback from the sea, which could have an impact on your friend Bob, who wants to build a house that's really kind of close, but not too close to the sea, whereas if the setbacks end up being greater, that could be a very practical impact. So there are a bunch of things that we really need to think about through a Bowen lens, and whether we would want to see those kinds of changes in the policy statement, because it will have an impact on us. And beginning in the fall, there were lots of other bits and pieces, but you guys can read the council highlights when they come out. Mainly because I can't remember all the other bits and pieces right now.
Yeah.
Been in meetings since Monday. Yeah.
So just a reminder, I include the council highlights in the minutes when I send them out, if you guys want to link through. There's all these great informative links in there.
Thank you, Steph.
Do you expect,
starting the review?
In the fall.
Thank you.
Yeah.
do you expect some contention in council about?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Would there be anything that in the Islands Trust policy statement review beyond the areas that they currently look at, which I guess is land use and issues around land use? I mean, like the big areas that Islands Trust sort of weigh in on, are they thinking of any structural changes in those areas, or just simply changes within?
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
The only thing that I can say that Claire said is changes to take into account climate change, but also First Nations. There's a lot of language that is language from a long time ago that needs to be updated in
Right.
the way that you talk about First Nations and the way you recognize their position within the trust, because there's something like 27 different nations represented within the trust area.
Does I wonder if going forward this group wants to maybe invite, because we have our Islands Trust is Michael Council and Fast, right? To invite the two of them to our group. And part of the reason why I'm thinking about this is there's, I don't believe that economic development in any capacity really factors into Islands Trust decision-making or the structure of what they do. And I think there is an argument with community economic development and the type of exercise that we're doing, that the decisions that Islands Trust does weigh in on, or the role that they play, does impact our community economic development and potentially our, how we see ourselves and what our plan is going forward. So if they're reviewing their policy statement, I suspect that they've been invited to the Rural Economic Forum, and so there'll be some input from there for sure. But maybe we need to be in sync with that, you know, and whether that's to, you know, I mean, it could be on all aspects, you know.
Wolfgang may be more knowledgeable
Yeah.
about this because he served as an Islands Trust trustee during his term.
I would say it's definitely a good idea to follow and stay informed about how this policy statement review is unfolding. I would say economic development is probably not on the top, but the need to keep some local economies on the island functioning is, there's a great awareness. It's not that they are opposed to that.
Right.
So I would not necessarily use the term to watch, but we should stay informed because it could well be something of value for Bowen Island. The thinking is somewhat different, but not completely out of line with what could work on Bowen Island as well. So rather than being alarmed, let's watch it, pay attention to what they're coming up with a sense of curiosity. That's what I actually, after serving in the Islands Press, had developed a high respect for the competence and integrity, and they are not the enemy of the people.
Right,
So,
right, yeah,
or quite the opposite.
yeah, yeah. Okay, good. So, well, thanks for bringing that up. And then, is Wendy with us? Do you want to have anything from the province?
Hi Wendy, do you have an update? Welcome.
Hi there, everyone.
Sadly,
The battery's full.
is full.
Volume's full.
Sorry, Wendy, we're not able to hear you just now.
Can you hear me now? I'm actually I'm not on speaker at all. On my
What's the speaker here?
It must be our phone. Gosh. $500 phone.
We still can't hear you.
We're going to try to get some more power in here, boost the signal.
Is that what you're going to speak for what I'm doing here? Wendy? No.
Oh,
Wendy?
yeah.
Wendy? Oh, we're muted now. Okay, Wendy, I'm going to mute us because it makes us hear you.
Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but we're muted. Go.
Okay, perfect. I don't have any updates. I apologize for coming in late to the meeting. Other than what was recently announced, I have, we're just over season right now on RDP. So if there are any other forthcoming applications, either from the municipality or Bowen Island, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you. Hi, Natasha. Anyone wants to talk?
Wendy, were you, it's Rod here. I'm just wondering if you were on when we did discuss the rural dividend application at all?
No, I was at the tail end of the conversation, so I came in right around, I think the last minute or 30 seconds of your RDP discussion.
Okay, well, just that's great that you are available, and we were thinking about communication of our approval, the permanent exemption, to the island, and we've discussed that a little bit, and we certainly will be forwarding people to the Rural Dividend Fund website. But just to clarify, so if there are other groups interested, probably outside of the municipality, that are aware of the application process, we're able to forward them directly to you. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that is possible. We've had one other inquiry, and typically we would then work directly with the RDP team in Victoria, but for sure they can put me in as the first point of contact.
is she?
Oh, sorry.
Okay, well, that's great, and we also are interested going forward, of course, and thinking into the future of providing support for groups in our community that are interested in the rural dividend application, and both through staff and through our volunteer committee.
Okay, that, just I think we can continue to have that conversation. Just bear in mind that the deadline is August 15th, so just want to make sure everyone's aware of the deadline. And there's actually a second round of webinar session on RDP that's coming up on Monday at 10 o'clock. If any organization in your community would be interested to listen in.
Okay, just want to ask her if there's anything else.
Okay, Wendy, is there anything else? We can move on? Oh.
That is all.
Thank you.
Okay, Arts Council.
I gave a quick overview at the last board of the status of our rural island economic forum. It became very apparent that arts and culture do not appear anywhere in the program design. I sent an email to the program team and got a very interesting email back from one of the other members who was very concerned about that also. Also raised another issue. Health and wellness is not within the scope of the program design. So we're going to talk about that at our next program meeting.
So just talking about tourism, sorry, for the Arts Council though, right?
Yes.
So the Arts Council has already, you've responded
Yes.
on behalf of the Arts Council.
Yes, and I've responded back to the program. Tomorrow night, Kathy Ainscough is opening show, Conceal and Reveal. Very interesting. I've seen the preview of it. And the Community Center celebration, which is, as you know, the Arts Council and the Muni are partnering on the Community Center, is happening on July 25th at 5 to 7 on the grass at the school. And it's a family festival. So there'll be hot dogs, there'll be festive things to do, so that's it.
Great. And I'm sure we'll hear lots about that in the undercurrent of otherwise.
Yes.
Yeah.
My God.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Ed. Then for the business engagement working group, Bowen, do you have anything or?
Yeah, we haven't, so there were some notes in here, right?
Yeah.
So what was the latest?
I guess that was from our previous minutes regarding
Yeah.
the tech meeting. So I guess the.
Right, find a champion who can start a co-working group, that area on page 6.
Yeah.
Well, all like the again, so we tried to do the meeting with the librarian, but it just didn't go anywhere. A date couldn't be agreed upon by more than one person, sort of thing, so,
I guess what would be good is and Robin probably could help answer that, but to understand what the next target group is and sort of target
Yeah.
date, which I think is September at this point, right?
I think so.
We're not trying to do
Yeah, sorry, I don't
anything.
have the notes here.
Yeah, I think that's what we said is September.
Yeah.
But we're not meeting again in August, right?
No.
No, so the next time we'll meet will be probably around the time when that group is, when the next engagement will be scheduled.
I can't recall what our next target group was.
Mhm. Yeah, okay, well, let's,
Was that health and wellness? We were talking about doing something in September?
we talked back and forth about a number, because we had the accommodation people, but that didn't fit.
Well,
you know,
I
for
can
the
speak to
tourism.
Robin.
Yeah.
And,
Is she away right now? Is that
Yeah.
why she's not
She's
here?
away right
She's
now,
away.
yeah.
She'll be back on Monday.
Okay, so I can speak with her and still meet with her in August, and we can, you know.
Here, I've got this, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah,
From the, sorry, no, it's on this computer, May 10th agenda,
yes.
the engagement plan, telecommuters, one. Then we had home office, self-employed, entrepreneurs, which kind of was the same group.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna skip that one. Then we have nonprofits. Then we have tourism businesses, accommodation providers, end of October.
Right, so nonprofits
so
is
first
probably
September, sorry.
This
next
was
one.
edited, this list though, I'm just
Mhm.
in pen.
Nonprofit.
We'll just, we'll
And
check
then-
with, we
yeah,
got it in our,
I can,
Yeah,
I'll get a hold
yeah.
of
Yeah.
Robin and
Yes.
we'll set something up to have a conversation, because we've kind of not, we've
Yes.
kind of just not been together
Yeah.
since the last.
And if there's, if a date can get set for September, sometime in August, I guess, before our next meeting ideally.
So just a heads up, there are no, I'll be taking holidays in August.
Okay.
But because of the UBCM in the middle of September, or the third week of September and August, I am slammed in September. So if any work needs to be done for me about this, we need to front load it in August.
Okay.
I will not be working on this in September, I don't think I'll be able to. So I have to
Okay.
do it in August,
Okay.
yeah. Just let me know.
Pardon me. Coughing is one of the hardest things for me right now.
Oh, no, poor Ron.
So you're gonna get notes
Yes.
to me then? Dawn, that's the action?
Pressure point, stops you coughing.
Oh, is it? Okay, that's.
Yes, we will endeavor to meet and get you some notes.
Okay.
So
The
then
next
might
engagement event.
October be a better time for a health and wellness one then?
I think so, but that'd be a good thing to,
Yeah.
just for the committee.
Well, unless we can get it organized in August,
Yes.
that you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
You had a time that works for health and wellness, right?
I know we were talking about September, October type of thing, but I'm kind of leaning towards October because I'm currently living off island because of my seasonal rental.
Okay.
And so I'm back in September, which is gonna be busy for me because I'm coming back, basically, moving back. But then in October, then I can, get back on, see what's going on and start reaching out to some contacts and, having maybe even like a roundtable discussion, like that idea that I emailed works really well for a lot of things. I did it a lot of the time at the Bowen Island Women in Business meeting, where there'd be like 12 of us sitting in a circle, everybody would come and talk about their issue, and then we would literally pass around a talking stick after, and every person would weigh in on the issue. And that's also, when you were talking about the Islands Trust, I kind of had that idea, because there's people who know the policy, and then there's people who want to take advantage of what they have to offer. And if we get them all in the same room or on the same conference line, I think it could just be a really good way to advise and get information out. And even if we just do it here type of thing.
Well, that'd be a good thing to maybe talk to Robin, because she's really been sort of coordinating, facilitating these business engagement meetings too. And can convince her about that.
Can I pencil in then October health and wellness? Are we okay?
Yeah, I think so. So September
Skip.
potentially nonprofit, October potentially health and wellness, and November accommodation. Is that what we're kind of thinking it might be?
If September is going to be a tough month because of a number of other things happening,
Yeah.
maybe we should just shift to October. We'll, as a committee, we will take this under advice and get back to you soon.
Is doing it monthly manageable?
Well,
No,
I don't know if it's not
it
manageable.
wasn't our plan.
Yeah, I just think that timing wise, maybe September just doesn't
Yes,
fit.
yes.
But October, November are probably good time to consult with people because it's not the high season,
Right.
especially the accommodations. Anyway, okay, so let's leave that to the committee.
Yes.
And digital roadmap working group.
Steph, when is your,
Yeah.
when is your holiday starting?
I haven't really booked holidays. I'm just
Oh, yeah.
planning on not really being here much of August.
Much
Okay.
of August,
Unless
so
I'm needed. I just have a little cabin and the Sunshine Coast, so I'm needed, I'm here.
But if we need to get contact you, should it be like by the first week of August then?
Sure,
Like, or if we're planning on going ahead with something,
yeah, let's
try
try
and do
it.
it within the first week of August.
Sure,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, Kirsten, do you have something?
Sure. So we did meet, Yvonne, Natasha and I met on the 25th of June. We missed Ed, who was
Without gallivanting.
vacationing.
Right.
Yeah, which is
Yeah.
allowed, which is
Yeah.
fine. And so just briefly, we had a chance to get together and to connect a little bit about, what could a digital strategy look like? What could it be? Could it simply be, something that could help residents and businesses connect information? Maybe something tied to wayfinding. Maybe, there were lots of different options that were out there. We talked about how, should a digital strategy really support more the residents and businesses on island accessing information and being aware of things, or should it be more aware of our tourism business and sort of, should it be a resource more for those visiting the island? And then we also talked about that whatever digital strategy is created needs to be sustainable. So even when we've talked about maybe doing an app, well, that's a great idea, but then who actually is going to have ownership of that app? It's ongoing maintenance and updates and making it relevant and useful. Like, it has to have that sustainability piece, and that can sometimes be a challenge. And then we also spoke about, the Tech and Telecommuters Luncheon, and that what we learned there, where it was, a lot of people wanted to connect socially. And then that sort of, our conversation then led to...
In person.
Yeah, in person. So then we started talking about like the business hive, and that's a really interesting initiative as well. So we're just sort of brainstorming, these digital strategies, what could it look like, but, at the end of the day, we're sort of reminded that a digital strategy is leveraging technology and connectivity to solve problems that are top of mind in a community. And we have great information, the notes that came from the Business Summit in February in terms of what's top of mind. But we did think of what additional outreach should we do to just have a better understanding of what challenges are top of mind for those on the island. And we did talk about doing a survey, or we did talk about doing, again, a general outreach, but, leveraging really the good work that the committees are doing sort of made sense. Like, rather than doing a broad engagement, maybe it's simply just reaching out to all the chairs of all the committees and asking something just as simple as, what are your top 3 challenges? Like, in terms of the work that the committee is doing, what's top of mind for that committee? 1 to 3. And so then what we had spoken about was sort of the action item of reaching out to the chairs and just inviting that input. Also reviewing our notes from the Business Summit in February, and then basically then looking at all of this information, if something would then sort of jump out in terms of what would be, what problem needs to be solved and how can technology solve it. Maybe from there we could come back with some draft digital strategies for consideration. And those were sort of my notes from the meeting. I know I did a quick draft just for Yvonne and Natasha to circle back with me to see if that was accurate. We were hoping maybe to reach out to the chairs before we had this meeting. It did not happen, but I think we do look at, knowing that we're meeting next in September, I think it would be nice if maybe we did that outreach to the chairs, got that information back, maybe met in August to again look at all of that information, and then ideally have a couple of ideas to share with this committee in September.
Terrific.
Ideally.
Yeah. Well, and I can see how that could be problematic with a lot of people being away in August
Yeah.
and so on. So,
I think we were working on drafting a standard template in order to get in contact with the heads of those committees and working on a strategy for reaching out with them.
Yeah, I think the idea was we were going to draft sort of the question for the chairs, and it could be something as easy as, an introduction that we're the digital working group, and we're looking at, blah, 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 as we said before, but you know, we're trying to keep it as simple as possible.
Mhm.
And
Neutral.
pardon me?
And neutral in a way.
And fairly neutral, yeah.
Yeah.
And just have the chairs then give us that information.
Here's, sorry to jump in just for a sec, but in terms of the good work that the other committees have done, especially, you know, when I think about some of the documents that they've produced recently, maybe as much as reaching out to the chairs, a review of that information, and I don't know if that follows in with what you're doing, Helen, but if it does, then maybe we could ask Helen to summarize, you know, from the information that, or from your, you know, survey of information over the next, and it may not be for September meeting, but in that time period to start doing that.
Well, it is just following that time period. I mean, I saw it, got a lot of the documents in here. So part of my research is to look at a lot of the documents that we've produced, because I agree a lot of them are really great. So like the arts and the, sorry, my voice doesn't carry very well. The arts and the culture ones in here, for instance, because I think that's a really great document that's been produced. There's another little one that's in here that's like a business one. There's loads of them.
There's transportation and
They're really
tourism.
great. Yeah, there's tons of them. And they're all really great. They've all got really awesome nuggets of information. And of course, all of those things form part and parcel of an economic development plan. As are all of the things that all of our subcommittees are doing. They all form part and parcel of this wider plan, right? So what I'm trying to do in my research and my review is take all of that information so that we can then, as I say, sort of strategically move forward. So I want to chat to all of you about what you guys are doing, because obviously what you guys are doing actually sort of falls under what we need to do in the next stage. So before we go crazy with the engagement portion of what we're doing, I just want to chat to us all so that we don't over-engage people, because obviously there is engagement fatigue, and I am conscious that I will have to do that as part of the economic development plan, and I don't want our groups to be like, oh, for goodness sake, just engage with us and ask us a load of stuff. I think it's awesome that we sort of start to engage them so they know who we are and what we're doing, but I'm just a little bit wary about us people, you know, people getting fed up with us.
Do you think it would make sense if we fed you sort of the quick little template and you just included it in your engagement?
Maybe, I think, I think I probably just need to come to your meeting and we'll sit down and have a chat.
I'm losing the thread, and it goes back to the outreach to the chairs and asking them about their prioritizing 3 challenges. What kind of challenge? Is it because this is a digital strategy that we're looking at? Are you asking them questions about the challenges they experience as a committee chair? Are you asking them about the challenges related to digital connectivity that they experience?
Can I answer that?
What's the focus?
The idea was that if you would ask them what the 3 challenges, like if they had them, but let's say, so not to pre-assume that there's anything that can be solved digitally, not to assume that that is the answer for anything. So to leave it wide open in the sense of what are you actually challenged by, and if you can guess, maybe the top 3 or 1, 2, or 3, whatever. As a committee, what are you trying to solve? Like what is your focus? What is really important for you? So just to identify what's going on in the community that is challenging, and then to look at that and to say, well, if transportation committee and X committee and X committee are all trying to solve something, can you kind of like put a digital lens on that? Is that a possible solution? But not to presuppose that it would be. Do you know what I mean? So you're trying to solve issues, but you don't want to try and create something that needs to be solved. You just want to find out what it is that might be solved that way.
So can I throw examples out if this would help? So I'm asking you, is the type of answer you may be expecting is if you're asking the Parks and Trails chair what the challenges, they would say access to the sea and linkages. Is that an appropriate response?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Or so the BIMTAC might say parking and
Right.
safe cycling across the island.
Yeah,
These are
exactly.
the kind of things?
Yeah, yeah. Like literally, it's just what are your top 3 most And then maybe you
pressing
might find, for
challenges,
instance, that a wayfinding app solves, you know, it can actually be a solution that would address 4 different committees' kind of priorities.
And linkages
So I can help
also.
you with those answers then, probably. I can help you with those, because I'm on all those, so maybe I can help if you want that.
Did you talk about survey versus interview?
Well, I guess then going back to this whole engagement fatigue,
Yeah.
and like we did talk about that, but then we thought, you know what, maybe we should just keep this super simple. Like, we already have some information from the business summit. That's good, rich information that needs to review, but also to get different perspectives, and that's why we thought just to keep it simple, to just, it could be a conversation with the committee chair, it could just be a quick email to say, I mean, Steph's answer, like, you got it, like, if transportation says, our top 3 most pressing issues right now, that's top of mind for the committee, is, you know, and you had, you know,
Finding a
trails
way
that goes back to the bladder,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
like, it does not have to be related to technology and connectivity. But as Vaughn was saying, sometimes a solution to these problems can be solved through technology and connectivity.
Yes.
Okay. I understand where you're going now. It might be helpful to also think about a follow-up meeting with all of the chairs and sharing with them. You know,
Do you
if
think that's possible?
Sure. Yeah, I
All
mean, they won't all
together?
come, but,
Yeah.
you know, certainly inviting them. And, you know, it might spark, you know, some further discussion. I wouldn't go in with that intent. I would see what you got from your initial work and whether it might be valuable. Yeah, great.
So Steph, what would be the best way for us to get that information
Yeah,
from
so
you?
I'm also thinking,
Like, we really thought we would just have to, like, divvy up the list and get on the phone and make
like,
8 phone calls each, because there's 25 chairs or something, right?
No,
No?
no.
25 committees? No?
you're gonna take away 8, well, not take away, but 7 are water, and so,
Okay, so
Different
we
kind
know
of
water's an
committee.
issue.
but I would talk to the chair of the Cove Bay Water Committee, so maybe that can be a representative, because he's very engaged with capital projects.
Would it make sense to look at what you have first, or to go to the
Like
committee
some
heads?
notes, I mean, maybe I can provide you with some, what I would do though is just if you're going in, just because of the confusion that an experienced counselor at this table has just experienced, don't go in with we're the digital working group. Like, I think that confuses people, so you just wanna come from we're just a subcommittee of the EDC who's gathering information about.
Like, honestly, I think if you just said, you know, as the chair of your committee and the work that's being done on your committee, what are your top 3 biggest challenges or issues?
Or can you say priorities and it's still,
Or
gonna have the
priorities.
same answer?
Exactly. Because that's a really quick answer. That's an
Yeah.
email,
Yeah.
oh, top 3 biggest priorities, boom.
Yeah.
And then we have it. And certainly, I think as we're looking at things and as we're coming up with ideas, and, you know, if we come back in September with some conceptual ideas, that may be a good time to maybe go back to the committees and do a little 10-minute delegation at their committee meetings to say, this is what we're thinking and this is what we're doing.
Well, maybe also in like the second or third round of questioning, maybe it might be worth asking some of these groups if they have heard of technological solutions to their issues. Like, not leading with it, but in like the second or third round of talking, because maybe they know, you know, some apps that have worked for them and that type of thing as well too. But at some point, not leading in, I agree with what Steph's saying.
So, actions, what goes first? Do you want to?
Do you want me to just do that first question?
Is that too much?
Coming from me, that's from,
Yeah. Well, and I know when we, yeah.
To each of
and
the
then,
chairs.
yeah, and I might even
Sure,
involve the whole committee, like I might address it to chair, and maybe see what committee members there have to say.
Maybe address it to the chair and ask the chair to ask the committee,
Yeah.
because otherwise you're gonna get a gong show of
Yeah.
responses.
Okay.
Yeah. And I like the initial contact coming through Steph, because she has that ongoing relationship with the committee
And
chairs.
neutrality.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And if it were to come from somebody within this committee asking those questions, I think there would be
It
questions.
takes more explanation to,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah.
Whereas it could
yeah.
be dead simple from.
Okay, so that'll just be the name your 3 priorities. Gather that information, share it with you guys, and
Yeah.
then your next steps.
Then what
Yeah.
what I'd like to do, if we could meet again in August
Yeah.
with a review of our meeting notes and with the information from the different committees. I just find when you put out a whole bunch of information, it's funny how things kind of pop out.
Yes.
And I thought that may be, I mean, maybe nothing pops out for us, or maybe we're gonna come up with lots of ideas, but I thought it would be exciting to come back in September to say, this is sort of what we learned, this is what we saw, here's some ideas of how we think technology and connectivity can solve these X number of problems. And that may be a good way of starting a digital strategy.
So, just to circle back then, is, in terms of engaging with the committee heads as an economic development committee or capacity, that capacity, we need to probably provide just a short background to what you're gonna send.
That's what I was just gonna say.
Well,
Some sort of
can see-
introduction.
But if we start to say we're the digital,
Yeah.
it's going to shade.
No, I think from an economic development committee standpoint.
Yeah,
If it's
well,
coming from Steph,
Yeah.
Yeah, just say it's
Yeah.
the work of the
We're looking for some
economic
shared
development.
data here, and I think that this will inform your work.
Well, I'm just wondering if we say as part of the development of the economic development.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking, and
Yeah.
if you want, maybe if Helen, you wanna talk to Steph about, or Steph and Kirsten about,
Yeah.
just to
Because-
kind of
Preamble.
give them some context of.
Because also it means that
What's going
when we do start to come in with the engagement, sorry, my brain just stopped working there for a second. When we come in with the engagement for the economic development plan, they already feel like we've begun because we've already started to talk to them as part of the economic development plan process, so I feel like it's all then linked.
Okay.
I think that
I would
might
like
be
to,
the way.
you
Yeah,
use
that's
the
good.
word priorities.
Yeah.
I would maybe stick with challenges, because priorities, they may just give us their objectives.
Their wish list.
And we want to know what
can
problems are
technology solve
they facing.
eventually?
Okay.
Okay?
you could even say, like, what are your top 3 problems you're trying to solve?
Yeah.
Okay.
Within your
Well, that
committee.
might get you back to your objectives. I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that, I'm trying to do that.
But
And that's
you
okay.
kind of do want to know that, like, it's a funny, it's a fine line, right? You kind of do want to know what is to be achieved, because then we can really look at that and say, wow, can a digital strategy help to achieve that?
Okay, I would argue that you want to know what obstacles you face.
Well, that's what I said in the first place, that
Yeah.
it's, what are your biggest problems, really,
Okay,
But like I said,
problems.
it's kind of like,
Like,
trying to solve
so
it.
again, like, going back to stuff you were saying, the transportation committee or the trails committee, what would you, you're familiar with that committee?
The parks and trails,
Parks and trails, so
linkages,
leakages.
So we've got all these
Yeah.
great parklands,
Yes,
Yeah.
and then private property in the middle of it all, so you can't get from
Yes.
one to the other. You want nice trails you can move through.
see, that's what we want to hear.
Yeah.
That's all we'd like to hear, is that those are the kind of answers we're looking for. That is one of your top of mind challenges you're trying to solve, is linkages.
but what is the problem? The problem, so here's
Yes,
my
yes,
problem.
Yes.
If the problem is they're not linked,
Yeah.
that's the answer. That's
Yeah.
not what we want to hear.
No,
We
but-
do want to hear what they are trying to achieve
They're trying to achieve connectivity.
in spite of that obstacle. So what they're trying to do, what they want, is to create what? They want people to be able to
Can
To
we
make
take this
it easy.
offline?
Yeah.
I mean, this is, I think this.
So we'll
we're
have to
getting
talk
in
about how to
early
do
here.
this question, I
Yes.
think, because it's
Yes.
more
Let's
complex
talk
than we
about it.
originally kind of thought.
Yes.
Sounded really simple, or
Yeah.
not, after beer at Doc Morgan's?
Yeah.
Like,
But no,
One
the challenges and achievements actually take you in often very different places.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk offline. And
Yeah.
Can I just,
Yeah.
just 2 comments? It might be, this is gonna sound mechanical, but it might be helpful to provide the chairs with a statement that you developed, that they have to fill in, that bounces from the challenge to the problem, to the, just like a fill in the blank. And do
Yeah.
it 3 times. And then you're going to get some sort of standardized responses from the chairs, and it's gonna make it easier for them to do it. They're gonna have fewer questions about what is it you're trying to get at.
Yeah.
And I don't know the exact wording, but just a
Yeah,
fill in
that's
the
good.
blank kind of thingy.
Yeah.
And then just the other point was, and this is more to the digital strategy generally rather than this particular project, education and digital strategy. I just want to make sure that that gets touched on somewhere. You know, the kids who are doing their work online, the people who are studying online, you know, so somewhere in there, just don't forget it, rather than solely the economic side of a digital strategy.
Good.
Okay.
Last comment.
Okay.
Great. So before we move on to the rural, and by the way, that I'm really impressed with your group and what you're thinking about and putting together, and just the notion of reaching out to the other subcommittee or committees is fantastic, because it's something I feel like, as the chair of this committee, I've been reached out to a couple times by other committees, and maybe haven't been as responsive as could have been useful, probably, for what they were asking. And I can imagine it goes both ways. You know, we're busy doing our thing, but it's really important in our community economic development exercise that we really are in touch with all these other committees. So, great. So with the Rural Island Economic Summit Working Group, we had 20 minutes allocated for that, and we had 20 minutes allocated to work plan review. But I think what I'd like to suggest is that we don't really need to review our work plan per se, so I think I'm going to ask to scratch that from the agenda.
I just wanted that there because
Yeah.
our next meeting is September, and then 2019 is over in December.
Yeah.
So just a nice, maybe on your phone, just take a look at it, where are we at with the work plan, and
Yeah, right, okay. So, at the risk of going long on the Economic Development Forum, Ed, do you want to just quickly update from the Story Working Group?
Nothing, so we
Nothing?
put it
Okay.
on hiatus till the fall.
Okay, great. Then, with that in mind, let's spend a little chunk of time here, and I'm thinking that because there's been so much going on with Vaughn, Ed, myself, and Natasha communicating with the Rural Islands Economic Forum, which is now called, and that's the event in September that will be held on Pender Island. And the reason, which was not clear at our last meeting, it's being held on Pender Island.
November.
In November, sorry, did I say September?
Okay,
November, gotta get my facts straight. The reason why it's being held.
It's September on Salt Spring.
Yeah.
what?
No.
It's actually
She's
November on
joking.
Pender.
Okay. So the reason why it's being held on Pender is because Poets Cove has the facility to accommodate about 120 to 150 delegates. And Salt Spring doesn't apparently have that facility.
That's surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's the largest.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they felt even though the accommodations might be somewhat limited, of course in November they're not so limited on Pender Island, but there is quite a bit of accommodation at Poets Cove, as well as they're organizing bed and breakfast and buses and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's kind of an aside. The way, just to review, the way that the summit has been being organized thus far, it's really been championed by Francine Carlin, who's on Salt Spring Island, and she's part of Opportunity Salt Spring, or their Community Economic Development Commission. And she is a volunteer and working very hard at this right from the beginning. As you probably remember, Bowen was asked whether we would support and pledge $1,500, which we did, towards the organizing of the summit. So the organization of the summit or the forum is moving rapidly forward, and there are ad hoc working groups that have been formed to help make that happen. And we're participating on 3 of them. There's the program group, which Ed alluded to earlier in the feedback from the Arts Council. There's the sponsorship group. Is it still called sponsorship?
I think partnerships now.
Partnerships. And the executive committee, and then there's a registration committee. And so we've got, we're participating and putting quite a bit of our effort into attending the Zoom conference meetings and also giving feedback as we go on. So yes, Natasha.
I remember you were going to send an email to the lady saying that I wanted to be on the
registration group, yeah.
Or was it?
Well, it was
wasn't
communication
it reviewing
/
communications?
registration,
Yeah.
And they seem so. Let's touch on each one of those areas.
Can I just mention, Rod, I was on a call with them yesterday, and Francine said she was sorry she hadn't reached out to you.
Okay, good. Yeah,
They
because
just felt that what they were doing right now, they had actually paid staff to do. And so they were going to, she would like to bring you in a little bit later. And thank you for your offer to help.
yeah. And I think I'll cover that, and then maybe we should just talk about it a little bit more afterwards too, because
Okay.
they definitely need help. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
So the way that communication is happening has been is being put together, and Francine has used the phrase a number of times that we're building the bridges, we're walking on it as far as going forward with this conference. And it is true. But what's interesting is when we get together on the group calls, which is up to 20 people, and on the committee calls, there really is a lot of interest among the islands, and things just fall out all the time it's clear because of the challenges that we face, with water, with hydro and electricity, and because of transportation, to and from our islands. Those are some of the common things that unite us. And as we were discussing earlier in the meeting, stewardship and the environment. Our value of our local communities and our connections within our communities. Like, these are things that really are common, more so between our island communities, our rural island communities, than with, for instance, between Bowen and West Van. And so the idea of having a forum where people from 16 different islands, as it stands right now, are going to get together in November, and just see what comes out of it. What are the conversations? And so the program committee has a great challenge to try to structure a program, whereas in a lot of ways, we need to leave things open so that what needs to be conversed about is conversed about. So anyway, do you want to just talk a little bit about the program?
The structure, the challenge we're facing is really this balance between flexibility and structure. The original program design appears to have come from thinking about the proposal that got the funding in the first place. They suggested several, I think 10 topic areas, and those have been winnowed down to 4. As I alluded to when talking with the Arts on Bowen board the other day, arts and culture have not even been thought about at all in the design here, nor has wellness and health, which is a big issue for some of the islands.
And youth engagement, we
Yes.
were talking about
Yes.
having youth there.
Yes. So what we're trying to do is to open up the 4 streams: entrepreneurial strategies, mobilizing capital, sustaining island culture, and I can't remember what the fourth one is.
Let me bring
But
it
what
up.
we're trying to do is open those up to start including things like arts and culture. Housing. When they did the original survey, housing was the foremost important topic. The decision was not to include it per se because of so many different jurisdictions. Some islands have to deal with First Nations issues. Others, like us, we're a municipality. We deal with housing in a different way. Others are under the jurisdiction of the Islands Trust. So that kind of got shifted away. We're trying to bring housing back a little bit into the forefront. So it is a struggle right now. We started with this, and we're trying to now turn it into something that is of real interest to the islands that will be participating, and also actionable. So the question is, how many plenary sessions do we have where we have a speaker? How many sessions do we have where we just have an issue and it's a facilitated a session? We've got 120 spots. How many spots, and a limited budget, how many subject matter experts can we have? So there's a lot of things that are quite unclear at the
And
moment.
you have Maureen's suggestion, I don't know if you were at the last meeting yet, but of the UBCM model.
Yes, we
okay.
talked about that, yes. So that's where we stand right now. It's, frankly, I think it's more work than a lot of us anticipated when we joined up. But it is.
But it's exciting. I
It-
actually think
It's
it's
exciting,
fantastic.
and
Yeah.
I'm getting to know some people from other islands that
Yeah.
are pretty neat. And
Yeah.
common interests, that's the thing I'm finding is
And I'm
the common
also,
interests.
I think the programming is gonna be the most difficult to really nail down.
Yes,
Especially with such a large group, but in the end, everyone just being together and
Yes.
sharing experiences is gonna be invaluable.
That's
So I
the
think
thinking.
however it comes out, people will still find their ways to connect in the way they need
Yeah.
to. So I'm not really so worried about that, and I'm also very confident that the like in terms of who they've actually hired from the organizational end of it is very good.
yes.
So the materials that are coming out, like the logo is beautiful. The sponsorship package, is being done by committee, but then there's someone who's, even like their media's, they're on it, it's good quality. So, and even the woman who is in charge, Susan, of logistics, but,
Yeah.
she's doing more than that. She's approaching sponsors, and she's got tons of experience, right? So,
Natasha, sorry, you had a comment?
I was just gonna ask, do you know how much of the Poets Cove they're actually taking up, like the resort? Like, are they using the restaurant, the banquet halls, the bar?
That has not been completely articulated to us. So
Okay.
it's an assumption we're working with, that we have 120 spaces, and that includes accommodations. So
Okay.
we have room for 120 people, 120 pillows, and assuming there's a space that will fit 120 people at one time. But these are,
Yeah, they do have
Yes,
it,
they
because I
do
was just
have it.
thinking
Okay.
that I was there in August,
Okay.
April,
okay.
and they have a huge restaurant, they have a huge
Good,
bar, and
okay.
then they have a banquet hall.
Good.
So in terms of programming, you could have multiple
Okay.
things going
Yes.
on, just depending
I'd
on
like to
which
talk to
space.
you about that, because that has not been, we've not gotten that information yet.
Yeah, I was there in April, it's
Um,
very, very fresh.
so I have to leave, I'm probably 10 minutes.
Okay,
Yeah. Can
so,
I just make a few
yeah,
comments
please do,
from
yeah,
my
yeah.
last meetings?
yeah,
Okay, so what I found out was that, because we were dealing with the budget in terms of how much money we're trying to raise, I think the budget is pretty much covered with what we have, but the idea is to get more sponsorship money to tide us over, to bring it into the next sphere, even though there is this application contribution going in for the organization, which needs to be a discussion here. Because they're asking for, well, from my last call, it was only like maybe 2,000 from Bowen as a sponsor for the ongoing organization, because the application has to show 20% in cash or in kind contributions outside of the
Yeah.
the funds. So, but what they did say was that they're not anticipating paying any speakers. Right? That's not on the, although there will be some First Nation premiums available. And then we had talked about trying to raise some money for some youth sponsorships, like our scholarships. And I don't know, can Wendy hear? Because last call, Wendy was going to check with a colleague just to see if she thought there might be any money for some, like, you know, scholarship type funds for the conference.
If you'd like assistance, please dial 0, and the TELUS operator will be happy to help you.
So Steph, could you email Wendy with that? Just to...
Me?
Would that, just as follow-up for Lon's question?
Oh, gone voicemail. The follow-up is, did she speak to...
She said she was going to speak to a colleague around whether there might be some funds to provide for the summit, to provide like youth scholarships to attend
for the REF Summit for youth to attend? Okay, and I guess I'm gonna call her back, sorry. Okay.
So their website is due to be ready on July 29th is their goal. Inviting like pre-registration, which I think is, I still don't understand how, both we have had discussions at the executive level around how that's all happening, which ties into, they've made this whole press package available. And I said, I think it was yesterday or the day before, I said, that why do we have a press package if we're all identifying in our community who are invited? And Francine said, well, it's not really to attract people to attend, members of the community. It's more just to give it some cachet, give it some, you know, this is what we're doing kind of thing, and it's going to happen, it's happening, and our community's involved in it, so I get that. But the idea is not to release any of that until after the website's up, so that people do have somewhere to go back to and refer. But to me, that still brings up, has the whole issue of how we're identifying who in the community, each community can go. I don't know if you've had any further...
Well, and just to be clear, the program funding doesn't have sponsorship for registrants or attendees. And so the cost of registration in the conference is $275 plus your own transportation and accommodation. So, you know, it's not an inexpensive trip to Pender Island. And, you know, we as a committee need to decide, and I guess council perhaps needs to decide who would represent Bowen Island and, you know, how that would be funded. So that's another question. So we've identified amongst ourselves in our Bowen Island working group people that we think would represent Bowen Island, and we've sent that list on to the registration committee. But the fact is those people, you know, first of all, right now don't even know that they've been identified, and second of all, they you know, even if they get an invitation, their invitation would, you know, can you find $1,000 to attend this conference if you're interested. And so, you know, there's big questions about what the registration numbers actually will be. And
didn't we decide that the invitation would come from us? No.
Yes, as a group, we've felt that we don't think that it would be appropriate for the organizing group doing the registration, starting to broadcast out invitations into our community, because there's a lot of context there.
Yeah.
But that would clearly need to happen, you know, by early September, so that people, you know, would have a few months to get their heads around it. So the idea of promoting, as you said, Vaughn, the fact that the conference will happen, not looking for registrations, but rather just making people generally aware in the community, I think it is appropriate. We need to meet again as a subcommittee here to review the press release, to review the registration information, the template that they've sent out, and make recommendations back to them, and then come up with a strategy or a timeline as to how we feel.
Because you mentioned a couple things that I wasn't aware of already that affect the program. So the program
I know
decisions.
there's a lot of overlap between these groups,
Yes.
right? Because you
But
kinda.
there's gaps, like,
Yeah.
no paying for subject matter experts.
Now, I don't know if that includes facilitators, I didn't
Yeah,
get
I
into
know.
it,
Yeah, I
it just
know.
was mentioned that, there was a decision based on other examples of other kinds of similar
Yeah.
programs in the area, right, that they don't pay their speakers, which I agree is fine, we don't need that for this.
We don't need keynote
We
speakers.
talked about
Yeah.
facilitators.
Yeah, Maureen, did you have a comment?
Just a tiny question.
Yeah.
Is it $99 per person for the event for accommodation, or $99 a night? It's not
Yeah,
clear.
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, so that's something that needs.
Probably at
sorted.
night, judging the facility.
I'm separate
Otherwise,
and about
that's-
99
no,
quid.
That's quite a deal.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought too.
I suggest that we get together as a group sooner
Yeah.
rather than later and sort out what we collectively know and
Yeah,
what we collectively don't know,
okay,
and go from there, because I'm just listening to you, I'm learning some things that would have been helpful
right.
in our last program meeting, so,
I'm gone the first 2 weeks of August, so just any time outside of that.
yeah.
Okay.
Sooner rather than later
Well-
if we can
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah, we'll do that in July. Helen?
I just need to ask a couple of questions because I kind of parachuted in the middle of like this discussion, so I've tried to catch up as much as I can with all of the emails backwards and forwards. So I remember seeing a list, and I think it was related to this, of who from this group, I think, was
Yeah.
going to go.
Not who's gonna go, but who we've
Who we
identified
thought was
as
gonna go?
potential
Would be-
Okay,
stakeholders. Yeah.
so
From
when-
different categories.
Okay, so when will we decide who we think is going to go? Like, how will we decide and when?
Okay,
Is
well,
that what we're waiting?
Yeah,
Even how
that's-
the conference is determining how many spots, because there's 16 islands involved and
Right.
120 registration spots.
So,
So that hasn't even been decided, has it, Rod?
How,
who is gonna be allocated what spots?
Yeah.
No, it's
No.
not.
yeah,
And
how
so,
many?
so there's a sense that we need to find out if people are interested, once they know, what the commitment financially and otherwise is from the different islands. At present, the budget, which I've just seen, there's the possibility of up to 120 registrants. The current budget is based on a break even for the conference at 94 registrants.
right.
And so somewhere, for the conference to move forward, somewhere between 94 and 120 people will be
Okay.
registered.
Okay.
And how those people are decided will, once registration officially opens,
Yeah.
because they're talking about the language in the releases right now is pre-registration,
Okay.
not registration.
Okay.
So once people express interest, I think that'll have something to do with it. But also, we put forward the idea that, it should be somewhat population-based, the allocations.
Yeah, okay.
And yet, there needs to be people from various stakeholding groups
Yeah,
from each island as well,
Yeah.
so.
okay,
And maybe some people will have to represent multiple stakeholders.
okay.
So,
Okay, so we'll set the meeting and.
Yeah.
yeah, we'll
start
have a
the-
meeting in the next couple of weeks before the end of July, I think would be
Yeah.
fine.
Yes.
Yeah.
We have a meeting, I think we have a meeting on July 19th, the program committee meeting.
Do we?
So if I can talk
Oh,
to you,
you do, yeah.
if I can talk to you before that,
Yeah,
it might be helpful.
absolutely.
I will offline.
Okay.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Mike.
Thank you
Thanks,
guys.
Dawn.
for like, right.
Now, we're at the end of our time, but we still have some things I'd like to go over. Is anyone
Sorry,
needing to leave? Yes, well, just let's find out how people are doing.
Oh, I just said one.
I have to be on the 12:15, but I
Okay.
can stick around for another 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, 15, 20 minutes, is that?
Yeah.
I've got to
Yeah.
go pretty soon.
Okay.
I can't wait that long. But I
Okay.
just want to mention the
Yeah.
Zoom invite I got
Yes.
was an actually historical recorded. I was trying to interact.
Oh.
Why wasn't this working? No, so if you could put me on an active link,
Yes.
I'll be happy to attend.
Okay, great.
funny experience. No one's listening to me. Oh, wait a second. Don't need to move
Zoom is very simple, but there are little things that glitches here and there.
I'm not muted. And Thanks.
Okay, yes, I will do that. I'll have, I'll make sure Francine has your right email, because
Yeah.
maybe that's the issue.
I don't know
Yeah.
it was, but
Okay. Okay, so as far as there have been various tools that have been put out, and one of them has been a program survey to the group, and Ed is trying to make heads or tails of that with the program committee. There's the list of people that have been accumulated from the various island communities, the registration list that we've been talking about. These are inputs that are going in. And there are commitments in the applications for the funding that are making this forum possible, to have First Nations at the table. So different First Nations organizations, there's a list of them have been approached. You know, that process has been going through. The outcome of the forum is essentially, you know, in our thinking is to foster communication among the islands, collaboration among the islands, and then to, out of that, look at the possibility of having an ongoing organization that would continue to help communication and collaboration between islands in their economic adventure, but also provide advocacy. And I foresee that a large part of that advocacy would be advocacy to the provincial government. You know, advocacy for funding support, for programs that would support community economic development in our communities. And what's interesting about this to me is that, like our discussion about our permanent exemption for the rural dividend program and our Islands Trust Association with these other islands, this is a different layer. This is why it's been an economic forum has been identified, because Islands Trust doesn't specifically look at how our health of our communities through economic opportunities. It looks at, you know, preserve and protect in the natural ecosystem to a large degree. Certainly community development is part of it, and community development is also part of economic development, and that's how we're looking at it. So the, I want to talk about the idea of an ongoing group and what that would mean, and where that's at right now. Because, and just hang on 1 second, I'm going to bring up my note as well. So there is a rural dividend application underway right now in the $100,000 category for the formation of a rural island economic group. And that group, I just want to read this to you because it's something that Pat Waddington from Malcolm Island, who's had a fair bit of experience with this type of organization. He's worked in economic development for over a decade now, in particular to that region in the last 6 or 7 years. And so he says, this is a note that he was writing to his board of directors for the economic development group for Malcolm Island. I've been working with the steering committee of the Rural Islands Economic Forum Initiative to help plan an event scheduled for November 7th, 8th, and attend a planning workshop in Sydney on July 2nd, which I was at. As an adjunct to the forum, The organizing committee is preparing a funding application to the BC Rural Dividend Fund for a grant to investigate development of a permanent organization for collaboration, communication, and advocacy on behalf of British Columbia's rural islands. The regional district of Mount Waddington in his area, representing Malcolm and Cormorant Islands, has been asked to contribute $2,000 towards the cost of the study, in support of which the following resolution is requested. So basically, what's happened with regards to this permanent organization is, in this intake of the Rural Dividend Fund, the Southern Gulf Islands Resource Center, which is a not-for-profit organization that has a variety of tourism and transportation strategies implementing right now, as well as some local community support and social support. That organization has taken on the lead in this application on behalf of all of the islands that are participating in the forum in November. They, like other rural dividend applications, there needs to be a cash in-kind commitment from the applicant to support the application and if it was successful. So thus far, that what they're asking from Bowen Island, and would have to be requested from council, would be a letter of support for the investigating the formation of this organization, but also some kind of pledge in the tune of, as Vaughn had mentioned, around $2,000. Just to give an idea, that the pledges that are currently being made from Salt Spring Island, 6,000, the Southern Gulf Island Resource Center, 2,000, Mount Waddington, which is Pat, who I just was reading a statement, 2,000, and then the question would be Bowen Island. There may be potentially some smaller contributions from some of the other smaller islands, but it's questionable whether they have the resources to be able to make those pledges at this point. This is somewhat time sensitive because the application needs to be in for August 15th. So this is something that as a committee we need to think about whether this is in alignment with what we're doing and as council, I guess, whether it is possible for us to support something like this at this time. And so that's in conjunction with organizing this forum. I have no doubt that, and I think Ed has expressed that when people from various islands get in a room, just like when we got together on our Zoom meetings, that we learn from each other and that we'll come up with ideas. The context or the format of community economic development, putting things against resilience, protection of the environment, and our community values are underpin everything that's going on in the forum and also in the application. And so I think that it's very much in alignment, everything that we've seen so far, with the work that we're doing on this committee. So the question is does Bowen value the opportunity probably to be somewhat of a leader? And I could foresee being population-wise, Salt Spring and Bowen probably the largest islands, and certainly, in terms of economic potential, Bowen and probably Salt Spring also have pretty much the largest opportunity. So the benefit, maybe this speaks, Wolfgang, to your comment about the Islands Trust, is the benefit of being in connection with all of the Gulf Islands is that we learn something that maybe we didn't know about ourselves, or opportunities that we may have about retaining our rural character and about preserving the community that we want or need going forward to be sustainable and to be a resilient community on Bowen Island. And those are I think the key reasons why we consider it.
I think also as another point, like we're talking about the individual strength of each island, but by forming a group, are we a bigger voice to talk with bigger municipalities and bigger organizations as well too.
Well, I think clearly you're right, and I mean, the fact that, you know, we got a permanent exemption in part because we're part of the Islands Trust is an answer to that question. You know, so does Bowen strengthen our position as a rural character community by being part of this group? I think clearly. And the opportunity in the fact that no one else in the group has a plan like we are proposing to write over the next 2 years with Helen already means that we have an opportunity to really to benefit other islands, to provide some example essentially of what can be done as they become more mature communities. Most islands, well, all islands except for Bowen Island, their governance structure has to do with the Islands Trust and the regional district that they are part of. So they elect representatives to a regional district, whether it's a capital regional district or Mount Waddington or Cumberland, I think it is, or, you know, there's various regional districts that the islands fall under, Nanaimo Regional District for Gabriola. So their governance is different, and they may very well look towards our successes and failures as a island municipality to guide them in the future and how they decide to move forward in governing their islands, and look at land use and so on and so forth. So there's probably an opportunity for Bowen in the future, if there's another economic forum, to host an event like this. I think it would make sense, you know, for us to consider that as a possibility going forward in the future. You know, what are the direct economic benefits? You know, can we quantify them today? I think that's going to be a real question at the forum. You know, like if we're getting together as a 16 different island communities, and probably would grow to more in the future, I would think. You know, how do we measure that, or what are there? Do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm just conscious of the time.
Yeah.
And if we're going to be doing anything with this, we need to decide it
Okay.
now. So I wonder if we could just get a sense of whether the committee in general supports putting forward a request to council to be involved in this rural dividend fund application. Just a
The application or the follow-up group?
Well, the application is for
Is for the follow-up group.
Is
Okay,
for the
yeah, sorry.
follow-up.
Yeah.
And does that, and we have to, in pledging $2,000 as part of our application?
Yes, yeah, so essentially that's the request. I mean, that council could decide to increase or decrease that, depending on what they felt was appropriate.
So just on a side note, I think probably we would have to say that the money would come from the Economic Development Committee budget, because I think if we don't, I think that probably wouldn't fly.
Okay.
So I've drafted a couple of resolutions that might move this forward if the committee wants to move forward with it. So that's my question.
Okay.
Is this a good idea? Do we want to do it?
Sure.
Yeah, put it
so
to
there's
the
no
questionnaire.
downside.
Excellent. Okay, so the letter that you have here with some tweaks, I think is appropriate. Council often uses hedge language, you know, so you'll see support in principle. Because we don't really know what this Rural Islands Economic Partnership Society is going to look like, but we support in principle
Right.
it going forward. And then council never gets excited about opportunities, it's just the language. You know, so tweak the language and I think it's good to go.
Okay.
Helen's point about, so we as a committee would recommend being involved with this, and then Helen's point about where's the money going to come from. So on page, whatever it is,
38?
page 38 of the agenda, we've got our budget requests. So if we're trying to come up with $2,000, could we use the money from education and courses and speakers and delegations for this purpose? We have not used any of that money yet.
We haven't. I was looking at education and courses to be some kind of bursary for people wanting to attend the summit. Because that's what you've used this for in the past, is sending people to conferences.
Okay.
But if that's used differently, yeah.
Which raises the issue,
How-
if we're sending anybody there,
Yes.
how are we going to pay for it?
Yes.
Hmm.
So Helen can be paid for out of the CED.
Yes, I have
grant.
money in my.
Okay.
She has a
Right.
travel grant,
Yeah.
so she's taken care of it.
Yeah.
A council member can probably request and
Yeah.
get okay, so it's really committee members.
Yes.
Yeah.
How would a committee member be paid for?
Yeah.
Do we have time to think about that in the future, or do we have to decide that today?
Well, the deadline's tight, so you'd have to
Yeah.
think quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I-
I suggest we just send Rod and use the money for that, because it makes the most sense for you. I mean, if you guys can go and there's limited budget, it would make sense to.
What we're suggesting is that we send Rod, then we're not supporting
That's
this
the issue,
application.
right?
Well, I think what I would suggest is that, that we potentially look to fundraise, outside of our budget for this, because although Vaughn's not here, she's part of the sponsorship group. Potentially, we could go to, for instance, First Credit Union, and ask them if they would support someone going. You know, I think there are other potential ways that we could get some bursaries or funding to send delegates.
So would that, sorry, would
Yeah,
that
go
be like, so you're sending a volunteer to the summit, is that affiliated with the municipality?
Well, we're sending members of the community, or we're
Yeah.
providing some support for members of the community, stakeholders who we've identified as a committee to attend the conference, right?
Sorry, I'm gonna have.
I have to go to.
Okay, so
We need to have
we
quorum
do need to have a vote.
Yeah.
So Kirsten and Kim, can you just hang on for a
Yes.
second?
for the resolution.
Yeah, so let's just read a resolution and see if you feel comfortable with it, and then we'll discuss it some more.
Okay. The Community Economic Development Committee requests the permission of council to reallocate $2,000 of its approved 2019 budget to support the Southern Gulf Islands Community Resource Center application to the Rural Dividend Fund to establish the Rural Islands Economic Partnership Society. Funds may be reallocated from speakers and delegations, $1,000, and education and courses, $1,000, totaling $2,000. So that's the resolution, and I can take, it does, it says what the purpose is, it identifies the bodies, it says the amount. At council, I can say, if we choose to reallocate these funds for this purpose, it does leave us in a bind as to paying for some committee members to attend. So I could say we can do this, and we can address the sending as a separate issue, or council could choose to find another source for the $2,000. But I just know if I don't go in being able to say the $2,000 can come from this pot,
Yeah.
that I won't get anywhere with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay,
So,
So,
question,
yeah, question, yeah.
who's in
So
favor?
first,
Moved. You moved it?
Wait a minute.
Okay.
Steph, did you have?
do you need another resolution for,
The letter?
Yes. or do you want to vote on this first and then talk about that one, or do you want to combine?
Let's vote on this first.
Okay,
let's vote on it first.
Thank you.
So who's moved?
Who moved
Wolfgang,
it?
did you move?
Wolfgang moved
I
it?
move, yeah.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Kim, you're gonna second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, all in favor.
Okay, great.
Sorry, guys, got ran.
Hold on.
Thanks, Maureen.
We needed
Thank
one
you, Kim.
regarding
Thank you,
And
Kirsten.
the second resolution is that council
The mayor
provide
sends
a letter of support.
Yeah.
I so move.
Second.
Yeah, all in favor? Okay, great,
Good.
thanks
Thank you so
again.
much.
All right.
Okay,
This
all right, thank
really
you for everyone for hanging
a
on.
struggle putting this together. It's coming. I think you're.
I think we can close the meeting.
Chill.
Steph, that leaves you without talking about your summit survey results, but can you send them to us? Is that
I have sent it to you.
Yeah.
Nobody should explain.
All right.
Well, okay, just to,
No, you did send them, and it was.
can
it
I
was
just,
helpful.
yeah, quick one, so I just,
Oh, she has to draw.
are you escaped, what?
Are you gonna draw the people, the winner?
I don't think we can do that on camera. So here is a full
Yeah.
graph, and I just printed out a full one, I probably want to printed back
Okay.
if you guys want. And I sent them to you, so.
Yes, it was helpful, I thought it
Right,
was useful.
there's something in there, I think
Okay.
for
Oh,
4
sweet.
months later, 17 people. And, yeah,
Well, this is good. You didn't need to do this on Excel, if you just do the question and then just list out all the comments. We don't need to know who said what. Do you know what I'm saying?
I was just doing this during the meeting.
Oh, okay.
So whatever.
So, did you have to do extra work, or?
Nope.
Okay, perfect. Okay,
It just, it
Yeah.
spit all this out and I just,
excellent, thank you.
Okay, and so our next meeting is
September 13th.
September
And
13th.
you can have my official regrets now because we'll be road tripping